Tonight, the UN stands at risk of imminent financial collapse, according to its Secretary-General. Iran stands on the brink of possible US airstrike, according to the US President. The old world order has been ruptured, says Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney. And if anyone thinks Europe can defend itself without the US, keep on dreaming, says the NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte. This period in time can be fairly seen as a key moment that sees legacies of world leaders made or ruined as they decide how to navigate the most powerful president in the world, the US president, who is shaping, indirectly or directly, most of these key world events. My next guest, the former Prime Minister of Sweden, the former co-chair of the Dayton Accords, the framework agreement that stopped the killing and brought peace in Bosnia in 1995, is also the special envoy at the UN for the then Secretary-General, Kofi Annan. Carl Bildt, welcome to France 24. Thank you for speaking to me tonight. Let's start, first of all, in a triage order. Let's start on Iran. We are, 3 days now into a moment that President Trump made explicit on Truth Social. Armada is coming, he said. Either you redo the deal on nuclear or you'll face military strikes. What do you think he should do? Should there be strikes on Iran?
I think what we should prefer is, of course, that there is a nuclear deal. I mean, we Europeans have been in favor of nuclear deals all the time. The original one that was thrown out by Trump, and then the efforts that were there earlier last year in order to revive the talks. If there's a possibility to revive the talks now, I think one should do it because that is preferable. There's no doubt that an agreement is more reliable and more durable than anything that could come out of a military operation if we restrict ourselves to the nuclear issue.
The argument the Americans are making right now is twofold, isn't it? It's about nuclear deal. It's also, we're hearing more about stopping the killing of thousands of people. Opposition groups talking about 30,000 people, protesters killed during this uprising, effectively suffocated, silenced. And now it appears from the correspondents we're listening to on the ground who have contacts in Iran, there's a kind of, quote, quiet civil war going on right now between those supporting the regime and those supporting the royalists. I spoke to one of your old colleagues on the programme last week, Ann Linde, the former foreign minister in Sweden, and she said things have to change. Maybe she didn't tacitly say there should be a strike, but she said maybe this is the moment with a weakened regime. Are there elements that you think actually if a strike did happen, there are positives within that?
We don't know, because we don't know what kind of strike it would be. Clearly, a strike to take out the nuclear elements of the equation, that's necessary because that's been done. I think the Israelis are favoring primarily a strike against the ballistic missile facilities of Iran. That's a separate issue, whether that can be done or not. If you do a strike for regime change, that is a somewhat tricky thing. Whether what you do, what the effect would be, and if you really achieve a regime change. I mean, that's never really been tried of that particular sort. You can strike against specific targets, but you can never be entirely certain about the political effects.
Let's move from Iran. As we wait, let's talk about the state of the United Nations. For many years now, there's been a regular conversation about how decaying or inoperative, broken the Security Council has been for many years. Those 5 countries that FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in the aftermath of the Second World War thought, OK, it's about influence of Russia, China, France, the UK, the US, the big spheres of influence at the time, that it's gone, it's changed. And if we see this rapid, we know from President Trump, he doesn't believe in this system. He's talked about not paying its worth. And now we're at a stage of financial crisis. Is this existential right now for the UN?
I hope not, because we clearly need the United Nations. I mean, there is, as you point out, the difficulties that are severe in the Security Council, which is a reflection of the tension between the superpowers, Americans, Russians, Chinese, and whoever is blocking decisions. But we should not forget that the United Nations has vital roles. I mean, it's reduced, but I mean, peacekeeping operations that needs to be paid, be that South Sudan, be that DRC, be that Haiti, slightly different operation. They do a lot of good things for global stability. There's a huge humanitarian operation. that is also there. Sudan again as one of the examples of that. So there's numerous functions that the United Nations does that we need for global stability. And if we were to take them away, we will be in a more tumultuous and chaotic and difficult world to manage. So the United Nations is needed, irrespective of the difficulties in the Security Council.
From your old colleagues, your old contacts there, the contacts you still have from when you were working there as a special representative there, how much has the system been rocked by President Trump? How much of a deep concern is there about what happens?
Well, there is, of course, deep concern. What has happened in primarily when he's left a different part of the more sort of the functional part of the UN family. He left the other day, formally speaking, the World Health Organization. There's no question that is very serious. I mean, pandemics don't know borders, and we really need global cooperation to meet the next one. It will happen at some point in time. And preparations globally are necessary. He's left everything that has to do with climate and the climate, to a certain extent energy as well. So the fact that he's going out of the one organization after the other, and he's cut back very heavily on humanitarian support, and now they are not paying evidently the money for the peacekeeping operations either. There's no question that it erodes the fabric of global cooperation to the detriment of the United States as well, by the way, but he doesn't really see it like that.
And it's a good point. And with trying to understand what's going on at the same time, coincidentally or not, Carl, we're seeing the birth of this organisation that started as a peace organisation for Gaza, the Board of Peace, that's now, from President Trump's own words, looking to outreach at other global conflict scenario. He said could work in tandem with the UN and dismissed the UN in some form or another. We're now seeing 25, 30 countries, Egypt, Morocco, Saudi Arabia now joining. From a Swedish position, is that an organisation you think your country should join? I know the Prime Minister's recently said, not right now.
No, I don't think that's going to happen. If you look at the structure of the organisation, it's a very strange thing. I mean, virtually everything is decided, new members, veto on decisions, future succession, and so it's decided by one person, Donald Trump. He's not the President of the United States, by the way. It's the person of Donald Trump. So it's not an extension of the United States, an extension of the personality of Donald Trump. And exactly what's going to do, where the money's going to come from, very uncertain. I mean, he said that some countries will, where they would extend their membership, pay $1 billion. I mean, Kosovo can't pay $1 billion. A lot of these countries that are on it, they can't pay $1 billion. And where is that money going to end up? I mean, there's no transparency whatsoever. And exactly, I mean, if you see the structures they've set up for Gaza, the technocratic and the supervision and things like that, that's composed of competent people that hopefully can do some good in Gaza, although that is difficult at the moment. But what's going to do in the rest of the world, highly uncertain. And the collection of outside of the Middle East, the collection of states that are on the board is doesn't look like it's going to have any effect on anything, to be quite precise.
And we know from recent history that your country thinks a lot about organisations to join, and it took a lot of what happened just a couple of years ago to join NATO. And I just wonder now, for what you knew now, you knew back then on the state of NATO, the post-Greenland incident, whether there's a sense of buyer's remorse, whether you think actually it's a time to kind of pause for thought over the value of NATO membership.
No, I don't think there's anything of that in neither with me nor in the Swedish debate. It's fairly clear that we have a somewhat more less predictable president of the United States, and there's an element of certainty associated with that. But the value of NATO lies in the integration between each of the nations. I see, for example, that we've had in the last week got the French Air Force operating up in the north of Sweden, joint operation with the Swedish Air Force. We have forces in Latvia contributing to Baltic security. That integration between forces is extremely important and strengthen us irrespective of the United States, then we will have, I think, a NATO with less of the United States. Because irrespectively of Donald Trump, the attention of the United States is going to be primarily elsewhere. We will not be able to count on the United States for the defense of Europe in the way that we did in the past.
Which brings us on to the point to a kind of divide amongst European leaders on actually strategic autonomy, which is the words that Ursula von der Leyen used, the European Commission president. And yet you counter that with what Mark Rutte, the General Secretary of NATO, said just in the past few days, that if Europe wants to go it alone without the US, dream on, he said. Where do you stand on that argument?
Well, I think his words were exaggerated and not entirely correct. What we need to have is more of capabilities in Europe, no question about that. We are dependent upon the Americans for a number of what we call enablers, be that airlift or be that an element of strategic intelligence. I mean, there are a number of these factors. And we have a rather strong American voice in the entire chain of command inside NATO. But most of that, apart from strategic nuclear deterrent, is replaceable. We can do these things. And we should not forget that we have an economy that is vastly richer than Russia. And we have actually more men under arms than Russia has. So to say that we are completely defenseless without the United States, I don't think that is factually accurate.
I think the point was as well, wasn't it, Carl, that we are looking at a world which will be vastly more expensive. He talked about the billions upon billions to cover security, and which the amount that's being paid towards NATO, the arguments towards 5%, he says it would have to be way beyond that. That ultimately to have an autonomy would cost not just governments but taxpayers and lifestyles vastly more.
I think that is exaggerated. If you look at what's happening now, look at Sweden, which I happen to know slightly better. We are more than doubling defense spending. That's going to be a substantial increase in capabilities. That means, as a matter of fact, that we go back to where we were at the end of the Cold War in terms of defense spending. And at the height of the Cold War, we spent substantially more as a proportion of GDP. It's actually doable that we can do these things. There's an element of strain in sort of some countries have a slightly more difficult fiscal situation than Sweden is fortunate to have, and most Northern European countries are fairly comfortable. But it is doable. And I'm fairly confident that will produce capabilities that will be a defense and a deterrent force that is going to be credible against most of the threats that we can foresee.
I'd like your thoughts on whether there is an immediately resolvable situation on Ukraine right now. I know that over the years you've met President Putin a number of times, even years and years ago in the 90s when he was an assistant, I think, to the mayor of St. Petersburg. So you didn't remember him back then. I think you've since said he remembered you. I'm not sure if that's a good or bad thing. But in terms of navigating Putin, therefore navigating President Trump on this as well, is this going to end towards peace without Russia seizing, annexing the Donbass, as it relentlessly requests?
Well, the logical thing would be, in my opinion, that we would have a ceasefire along the present line of confrontation. And that was also the line that was taken, as a matter of fact, by President Trump in the beginning of last year, and it was taken by the Europeans and accepted by the Ukrainians. Then suddenly at the Alaska summit, Trump changed and endorsed de facto the Russian position that they want to conquer also, get also control of the remaining part of the region of Donetsk. And that, I think, is going to be a very, very, very difficult thing for the Ukrainians to swallow. And that's where we are. Had Trump not changed his position, had there been sustained combined American and European pressure on Putin to have a ceasefire along the lines of confrontation, we might have been much closer to the end of this war than we are at the moment. Now there's sort of the uncertainty of the American approach, and then on the key remaining issues being more on the Russian side, the Ukrainian side, I think that has encouraged Putin to go on. And that means that the end of the war isn't in sight yet.
The other aspect of this is the London study of war. has looked at the pace of this conflict. I think it's moving right slow right now in terms of where Russia is pushing on the front line between 15 and 17 metres per day. So kind of snail's pace at the moment, but moving. And if this perhaps by the end of next year, some predictions suggest, again, all things being equal, that might be the time that the Donbass, if it could be taken, would be taken. And I wonder if that also plays in the leverage to President Putin right now. And I guess you and I have spoken over the last couple of years about this, that we're in a situation where this grinds on. Is there a way that you think President Trump can be convinced? And I look at other European leaders right now. I mentioned right at the top legacy-making moments and suggestions. We heard it from Gavin Newsom in the US, the Democrats saying that they've been on their knees. They needed knee pads right now. Somebody needs to stand up. And I think, can President Trump's tone be changed? And also, is there a European that you see who is most effective right now?
I think we need to really convince President Putin that he can't win. There's absolutely no way he can win this particular thing. And that means that the continuation of the war will, well, incremental square kilometers here and there, but essentially it will bring Russia down in terms of both economic issues and political issues long term. He probably thinks that he can win in three different ways. I mean, you thought militarily. I think that's fairly clear not going to happen. I mean, nearly 4 years of war and more than 1 million casualties. His army has managed to take slightly more than 90% of Ukraine territory. It's a fairly miserable military performance, and I don't think that's going to change. We don't see any sign of that. He could have believed that President Trump is going to sort of deliver Zelensky on a plate to him. And as I said, I'm rather critical of the Trump approach, but he hasn't delivered. And I don't think he will deliver Zelensky on a plate to President Putin. And then the third, President might have believed that the Europeans are going to be tired of the entire thing and stop supporting, giving the necessary financial and military support to Ukraine. That has not happened either. We see rather solidifying of European support, and the recent decision on the 90 billion euros for the next 2 years means that there is substantial support. So when he looks at it, or when sensible people in the Kremlin looks at the prospects for the months and years ahead, there's simply no way they can win this particular conflict. It's a question then of when do they manage or convince or make it clear to President Putin that that is the case, and that he needs to close down this rather insane war that he has started. We don't know, but I think it will happen sooner or later.
And the point I made about a European, is there a European leader that you think has met or is meeting the moment when it comes to negotiating with Trump, with President Putin, with Zelensky, speaking for Europe on a European stage?
I think a very encouraging development has been the development of what we call the coalition of the willing. And the fact that we've seen the trio, really, of London, Paris and Berlin, together with Brussels, working very closely together. I mean, Brexit was a setback for Europe to work together in foreign and security affairs. But we've seen now the coalition of willing emerging as a new entity with those three leaders supported by others. Being forceful in the support that they have given Ukraine. It's not a question of the one or the other. It's the combination of the three and the others in the coalition of the willing that has proved to be better and more stronger than I think most people expected.
Really good to talk to you tonight, Carl. As always, thank you so much for your time. And Carl Bildt, former Swedish Prime Minister. Speak to you again soon. Let's